In a world dominated by the dizzying speed and sheer waste of fast fashion, systemic change can feel incredibly slow. Yet, significant and meaningful change is often taking places in pockets where we least expect. Today, we're turning our lenses towards the power of the local, towards regional craftsmanship, and the importance of creating micro ecosystems where we are doing things a little bit different. To dive into this, I sat down with Denise, a Caribbean researcher, artist, and designer, as well as founder of the social enterprise called Made Neo. Rooted in her mixed heritage and the secular traditions of her family in Trinidad, she brings a deeply profound perspective to the table. From envisioning new purposes for historical indigo pits to recycling carnival waste, Denise is actively investigating new ways of relating with each other as well as the materials that surround us every day by putting community and social justice at the forefront. Get ready for a beautifully candid, eye-opening and honest conversation about resisting hypercapitalism, rethinking our wardrobes, and why collaboration might be the ultimate key to help us make a change. This is Nina, and this is an Unsustainable production.
Welcome to this interview, this talk. It's very nice to have you. I'm quite excited about this. And I thought we might be able to start by you telling us a little bit about your story, about your upbringing, what brought you to where you are to create the company you now have, which is Made Neo, right?
Yeah. So hi, Nina. Thanks for having me. This is really awesome. I always, it's always a little bit difficult to speak about my, who I am, because I'm not young. I've done so many things. And, but the essence of that would be the whole issue of sustainability and how it's become such a big part of my life right now. So I think growing up, people reuse things in the Caribbean. You would see people using tins and cans and reusing them to make cups, and it was okay. It was okay. It was normal. And so, my grandparents had a farm as well. It was a homestead, so just like under 2 acres. And this was a part of a project that was done in Trinidad where people had homesteads. It was meant to feed the family and to share among the community the excess or exchange, different things. And so that idea of circularity was there. But when my grandmother would rear animals, and for specific occasions, let's say like Christmas time, if they reared pigs, it was for that purpose, that time, no excess. Everything was used in the animal. And so it wasn't an abuse of that. It was quite kind, even the way that she slaughtered them, right? You wouldn't hear any noise. It was just such a ritualistic kind of thing, watching her her compare, which was her girlfriend, doing this. So that was, a big part of who I am, as a youngster, seeing all of this. So my mother actually practiced some of those things as well. And so I went to university, graduated with a degree in psychology, came back to my country, and I was like, what am I doing? I couldn't find a job, and it was just like such a I don't know what to do with my life kind of time. And started to
I think we all have
money.
that a little bit.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty normal, I think.
Yeah.
And I didn't have much money and stuff. So I was like, I love fashion. I always did. I like going to thrift shops in Toronto where I went to school. And, so it was all part of the not having a lot of money that sort of pushed that too. And then when I came back here, just started making jewelry. I said, I have to figure out something to make some kind of money. And so myself, my sister, and a cousin of mine, we started this mini collective. And we started doing accessories, fashion accessories, from bags to even slippers to earrings, all from found and used materials. Ended up doing exhibitions it was a cool time because at that time, politically, there was a shift in what was allowed to come into the country. So there were high import taxes on fashion. And so the community started looking inward and actually looking at designers and locally made things. So it was an amazing time. That changed after a couple of years, the whole geopolitics thing. When I started doing this work, the state got involved. And I think it's very important that government creates the environment for things to flourish, to be nurtured. And so going local needs that. We need, in every country, would need that kind of support. And it means that the state would have to have a kind of political will, the people in the will to see that this is so necessary. And it's in almost every aspect of the economy, of any economy, so how, so there's that, and there's the nurturing of local craft and craftsmanship and artisanal work and local ingredients, and there's all of that. But we can't do it alone. There's a lot of people who are lobbying for sustainability practices and for circularity practices, and so we need that as well, activism. So there's a combination of things. It's not a silo. We absolutely need to have a combination of things taking effect.
I know you're not a politician, but I'm just wondering if you could if there's some things that you as a business owner, someone trying to promote sustainable fashion, if there's certain principles or policies you think that would be beneficial for a government to adopt, what would they be?
The state will have to have an understanding of who we are, who the people are, where they're at, and so to take a stock of what's happening on the ground. And that's one of the things, that distance between state and the people is something that has to be bridged. So policies like, having MPs, for example, really understand the population of who they serve and what they're doing and what their needs are. I think that has to be there. And in understanding those needs and the trade-offs that could exist when certain policies are placed is also an understanding that they would have to have. I feel like policies like maybe, local campaigns about the benefits of going local, buying local, and supporting local. Only the state could afford that. You know what I mean? To have consumer awareness campaigns. This is what's going to happen if you grow food. If you grow your own food, buy food locally, it's going to cost us less. We're going to reduce carbon emissions from importing. And, the shipping alone causes a lot of, carbon emissions and negative impact. So I think consumer awareness is definitely something that policies could be, made to address. And also importation. Like right now in Trinidad, we have a huge problem with food. We import, I think it's like maybe, I don't want to quote this, I think it's about it's over 50% for sure of food is imported. So that has affected our agriculture sector. And so it's a terrible issue with food security coming up. So we're going to see probably, the state maybe raising import duties on non-essentials. All the stuff all the fancy stuff that we think we need. This questions, freedom and our rights and all of these things people say, but we also have a responsibility to the planet. So so I think policies could be addressed around those areas like importation, consumer awareness. And that's it for now. I could go into many others, but at least I think those two things could help a local economy, any local sector.
What does this alternative system look like? What needs to change? What's the horizon you're aiming for, basically?
Yeah. So I have I started this brand with my daughter. We co-founded it in 2020. It's called Made. It's, we're a fashion brand, but with a lot of social enterprise activities. So, trying to build a mini ecosystem of circularity, circular fashion. So we innovate a lot, and we try to show the world this and show it to people. And if people want to learn how to do this, we show them that as well. So that's one thing, and we do that's the commercial side where we actually sell the product online and pop-ups and that kind of thing. But that's also our focus hasn't really been on sales so much. It's more like more like a sort of portfolio of the work, and so we're really trying to bridge the gap between the commercial side and the social enterprise side, and we just go about that by creating relationships with different communities. And right now, though I'm in Trinidad, I do some work in Toronto as well. So we've been working with an organization called Sistering, and they have, as part of their they've created a social enterprise called Spun Studio, where they offer different kinds of classes and a space for vulnerable women to learn, to connect, and to figure things out. So, so I've been working with them for a few years. It's slow fashion. So, we're not forcing the point. The idea is to get even an awareness to the participants about sustainable fashion, about how they can repair work, how they can actually build a small business if they wanted to from using some of the skills that they have. Because some of the people that come to Spun Studio already have skills like crochet, embroidery, sewing. So it's women from all over the world. Toronto is this hodgepodge of all kinds of people. So that's a blessing to me, because these are the skills that I like to harness, right? Even though, in our studio, we create things as well. It's more of we try to innovate with what exists already. But it would be really cool to have, these hubs of innovation happening, and people using their own skills in different cities or different communities that are able to use their crafts to upcycle and to create new things. We'll speak about Tobago. Tobago is our sister island. It's Trinidad and Tobago. In the 1700s, there was a thriving indigo industry. It was, there were actually indigo pits, and people were forced. It wasn't paid labor, but it was it was part of that the colonial period, where these indigo pits were used, and the indigo plants were planted, and indigo dyes were made, exported to Europe. So indigo was king at that time. And so it was a huge cash crop. And so the plant still exists. These pits still exist in Tobago. So I'm thinking it would be really interesting to, I don't want to say revitalize, because we don't want the same thing. We want to recreate. I'd like to see something recreated, because it's such a beautiful resource. It's amazing color. It's supposed to be very good for the skin. It has medicinal value as well. So the idea would be to create workshops and to work with the state to see if we could bring this part of this thing back to life in a modern way, and in a way that includes community, and the stakeholders have a stake in the value chain and in the profit or whatever is made from it in whatever way. So so I'm seeing this as a regional effort. And so I'm just at the beginning stages, trying to find the pits and working with people on the ground in Tobago who have done some research. So a lot of primary research has been done already in terms of the history, locating these spaces and the plants in the wild.
When you talk about revitalizing, you're quite careful about that word, and I totally get that. I mean, as someone with heritage from Brazil, who's spent half of my life there, I like the word reclaim, because it's also like, it's like, because I mean, in Brazil, we have this big process where like a lot of our history and the historical processes, related to indigenous families, Afro-descendant families, a lot of it is just sort of erased. And I feel like, it's not really about that, because erasing doesn't make it go away, but it's like, how do we reclaim the spaces that our ancestors have been occupying and living in inhumane conditions, and how do we give it, how do we make that theirs again, because they are the people living close to this land. So I think that's a very powerful move, instead of saying like we're going back to that time, we're actually, we're creating a new narrative, but we're still occupying the spaces that our ancestors have occupied in a sense, but in a different way, bringing them into the equation in a different way.
Absolutely.
So
that's part of the whole idea of social justice as well. To look at things from those perspectives, and we talk about sustainability. This is such an important part of that whole idea. We have to look at history. We have to look at. Some people are looking at reparations. All of that is involved, and reclaiming, I think, is a really excellent word. Decolonizing is the word to be used in the textbooks. I feel I want to kind of search for like a sweeter word, something that makes us smile. You know what I mean? So because when we talk about this, it seems so big. Like, oh my God. It's kind of like reclaiming, even though it's a great word because you're taking something back. It's sort of like, it could be heavy, So I'm mindful of that, and I think looking at the now is perhaps, how do we address it, like the now? What's happening now?
Also, when we go into like, when it becomes academic and then it becomes very theorized, but the theory is not so close to the practice. There is one quilombola writing. So in Brazil, we have a lot of quilombola communities, which are communities that were formed by fugitive enslaved people, and they managed to survive outside the slavery system. Right. And there's this one writer, he died recently actually, he's called Nego Bispo. And he's like, I don't like this word decolonial. Like, as a quilombola person, we are against colony, we're contra-colonial because we were never colonized. We refuse that. And I feel like, it's interesting to just like how we accept words, but they sometimes take away the nuances because every place is different. It's a major discussion, like also like, definitions and how to, be careful with what we say and how we box people when we use words. I think it's definitely an important conversation. How can the sustainability movement benefit from rooting itself in Indigenous practices, Indigenous knowledges? What does the Caribbean, what messages can the rest of the world learn from the Caribbean? A big question again.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that all the time, we have, so for me, I identify with being Indigenous, being from the Wararoo tribe. There is stuff happening in that area, but I have not honestly gotten really close to my people. I consider myself a Caribbean woman. However, I think it's important for me to claim those roots because it was very big in my family growing up. As I described, my grandmother and her parents, and even my grandfather on my mom's side of the family were noticeably Wararu. And so some people say it's Taino, So I'm still trying to find this out slowly. I'm not in a rush. And I'm part African and also part European and maybe many other things. I haven't done the ancestry thing, but those are the three groups. And I always talk about the matriarchs because they were the ones that I suppose in my young days that I saw more, and communicated more with them on that. So a lot of this traditional knowledge I learned from my grandmother and my mother. It was just so natural. It was just so, I never knew what that was, just knowledge, right? It was just information. But, I'm doing this program on sustainability education, a PhD at the college, and that has opened me up to a lot of this, traditional ecological knowledge. I never knew that word existed, and that and the importance of this knowledge, which I really practice in my life. Some of it, especially regarding herbs and natural medicines and plants and agriculture and all of that. How just recently, maybe in the past 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years or so, realize how important it is, and that. So I would have had conversations with educators, with my sisters who are both educators, and my mother was also an educator, about the importance of teaching from a local perspective, because a lot of our education in the Caribbean was handed down by the colonizers. So, our education system has a lot of, we have a lot of challenges, we believe, right? The way we teach, the language, the teaching in nature, all of these things that was done by our ancestors should be brought back. And I think that's one way to teach sustainability in fashion as well, because it's not, when we look at fashion from the runways and on Instagram, and we don't see the back end of it. It's only now, in very recent times, and I guess through social media too, that we're able to see what's going on in other parts of the world, how things are produced, the injustices that the sector has done, what it's done to agriculture, the soils. So I think place-based education and traditional ecological knowledge is actually a good place to which is something I've been doing anyway, but now there are words to it. So I think it's a good place to start, because it's, I think people would understand and then get it, that fabric comes from plants, natural fabrics, and why it's so important to continue these traditions,
What are your thoughts on branding indigenous values, branding culture to make it accessible and appealing to people? Because I feel people are still very much driven by just kind of the accessibility of fast fashion. It's easy, it's available, it's cheap. So how do we, encourage them to see that? I mean, you talked about the government and so on, but do you have any other ideas of how do we brand that? Keeping the soul of it, just not going into pure marketing, because I think that's a big thing with marketing. How do we keep the connection there?
Yeah, that's a big question. But I'll just be honest and talk about how I feel about marketing and about this idea of scaling. We hear people talk and they a lot of things. Oh, but how are we going to scale this? Scaling seems to be a big focus, or I think we're stuck on what that means. With scaling, it's really about how much profit they want to make, right? And I am not against reaping the value from something that I've sold or that other people have sold. But I think that we have to understand what scaling means and for who. And I think when we're talking about slow fashion, we have to consider these things. Like if let's say we got an indigo collective going, that we're making the dyes in Tobago, and we've decided that we want to do a collection of things, and we have to look at the time it takes. There's no rush. It has to be managed in that way. Like this concept of a minimum wage. How are you going to pay people? Like, what is that? What does that mean for this collective? So there's a lot of issues. There are a lot of areas that we'd have to figure out. Like, how do we want this business or this collective to run and operate? Are they going to be equal partners? All the 20 people in the collective who to be equal partners and have equal say? Why not? I don't know. Some people might say that that's absurd. It might be difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. So yeah, I think we'll have to look at the issue of scaling, what the capabilities of this collective is, and brand it as such. This is slow. This is what we can do. We do 100 pieces a year, and they're all done well. They're all done, by hand or whatever the mechanisms are. There's traceability, so that we can record that. It's recorded and it's tagged on the garment. And I think Europe is doing that now. I'm not sure about what's going on exactly, but I know that there is some movement towards really helping consumers to be aware and to know what they're buying. So if you're interested in this stuff, this kind of thing, this kind of object, it's like art. It's like you're going to buy a piece of art. You have to be interested in this type of thing to buy it, right? And I think it has to be branded as that. A colleague of mine, if you listen to the interview, Steve Maxime, who's a climate smart agriculturist and thinker.
He's quite a personality.
Yeah, I love him. He's a very good friend and he's a mentor. And so yeah, and so he talked about intellectual property, and I agree that even plants can be branded as this is
that's crazy, isn't it?
Here. It is, right? I have personal feelings about that, that things are meant to be free and grown and whatever. But we live in a world where, people have to eat and people have to make some money, and that's what we use for purchasing power. So I think that I think it should be okay for a country to grow something and really create a specialty product and to say, listen, if you want to use it, you can use it, but this is how much you have to pay for it.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's a very interesting point, because I think when it returns to the country, then it's interesting to have that ownership. But then there's the question, what happens if the foreign company patents the seed from somewhere else, Right. And then it becomes problematic. And how do they kind of like colonize even the plants of that place, Do you know Vandana Shiva?
Don't think so.
She takes on one line of like ecofeminism, but she talks about I think it's called biopiracy, whereas then people patent plants and they almost like they steal that technology and then they start selling seeds, and then certain seeds that modify.
I hear you with the plant. I mean, I was a little bit uncomfortable. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it because I think that I feel like the focus should really be more on design. So the making of the dye and the design, what you do with that, However, that's also culturally appropriated too. So, we still have to be mindful of what is used, what's ethical, what is, what's our ideology. I feel though that the economic side of it, how we do business and how workers benefit, how collectives could benefit. I'm saying collectives because I'm seeing these as small as ecosystems that to really focus on innovation and creativity and all that good stuff.
Lovely.
The economics of it, like I think that's so important because when you look at fast fashion and the factories and all of that stuff and the pollution, and it's actually so disgusting, like I heard someone says to me once, but people are getting jobs, and I'm like, people are really forced to do those jobs, not by gunpoint, but by necessity. And,
they're not really the ones benefiting. Like, they're not really the ones turning a profit from the system, are they? They're just, they're getting the bare minimum, and sometimes even below the bare minimum. So just creating jobs, like what kind of jobs are you creating? Like, I feel like we should be going beyond that, just or like someone has a job, you know, like, could this be, is it necessary? Are these conditions necessary? Because a lot of the time I don't think, you know, they are, you know, and I don't think they're fair. So yeah, definitely something important to look at.
Yeah, if we all make, we all make a good living. But you see, this is what, I always bring in the concept of capitalism. This extreme right capitalism that exists now, it really doesn't care about people. It's just about the shareholders, right? And how much profit, how to squeeze as much profit out of this system. So, and it's something that I'm very conscious about. And so I think even in my earlier days, I worked with a company called The Cloth. We were the Cloth Homework Alpha company. And so we worked together for a few years, and we created a beautiful ecosystem. But at the time, there wasn't much about natural dyeing and all of that. But, our hope was that the workers would feel a part of this business, train them in what we, in the skills that we wanted to have in our small business. And we had hoped that, we would eventually create an opportunity for ownership. And this was this was in the 90s. So, and my partner then, Robert, was quite he was very influenced by unions and, the rights of workers and things like that. So, I feel a really good organization can be set up. I think really it's really the people that could make it happen.
Do you have like any other like partnerships you're exploring materials processes with that you could share with us, or even like past examples? And I'd love to hear more about the kind of stuff you've explored, are exploring, or have explored.
So I've been working with not working with an actual making stuff, but trying to build a partnership or collaboration with an organization in Trinidad called Carnival, and they work a lot with carnival waste. I don't know if you know, but we have a huge carnival in Trinidad. I think it's around the same time as Brazil's carnival.
Yeah, we have a big carnival too, which I missed this year, and I was like, no.
It changes. It usually works around the same time as the Lenten season. The Catholic Lenten season, so it's usually the week before that, or so it's usually February or early March, so so we've been working for a while together trying to influence. She did a lot of work in actually collecting data, collecting waste materials, and cleaning, sanitizing like the feathers and the gems, and so try to get it back into the system through for art, different crafts people, or trying to get mass bands to buy them back. I don't know how successful they've been with selling it back to the mass bands, but I know that other people buy them to even make their own costumes. But we've just been trying to set up something in Trinidad and Tobago. But that's something that I really look forward to, because it's an opportunity to mix the carnival waste, carnival fashion, because we call it carnival fashion waste, with regular fashion waste, so that we could try to eventually come up with other kinds of materials that we can use in carnival fashion design. Because, as you know, it's a lot of synthetics that we use in carnival fashion. So that's the only other agency that I'd like to work with, and we've been trying to get grants and stuff. And, hopefully something will happen soon.
Always we have to remember that it's like, I think with sustainability and cycle innovation, just because we're working to create frameworks that don't exist yet, it's very slow. And I feel like finding people to come on board, getting governments to cooperate can also be slow. So for instance, now I currently volunteer it's like a social project here in London, where we've got we're growing mushrooms, we've got carpentry, we've got artists coming in, you've got sustainable urban gardening. But they just brought in an aerobic digester, and basically they bring, there's a tower block next door. They bring in the food that the people produce there, the food waste, and they put it in a machine, and then the machine generates a biofertilizer and a biogas. And they've just brought in a sauna that they want to power with the biogas, and they've got everything ready, but then they need to get, they need to get the pick the signs, they need to get like, I don't know if it's a motor or so on, but then they need to get insurance, but no one wants to insure them because it's never happened before. So it's just kind of like understanding how slow, because many people think, oh, you know, not much is happening, not much going on, but there's actually, you have to press so much for these things to happen. And, you know, like I think we need to put everyone on board, and we need to have the understanding, you know, that we're working within a system. It's systematic, and that it's not just going to happen from day to night. And it's not because we don't have the knowledge, it's not because we don't have the will, but it's because it's systematic, you know? So yeah, sometimes I feel like, you know, there's a lot going on, and it feels like, you know, there's a lot of barriers still to break, partnerships to be formed, but like, I kind of like, I understand and I see it happening, and I believe, you know, that it's happening. So I kind of just want to say that I appreciate the work you're doing.
Systems were built to work and last. They weren't, systems are not built to break, really. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we think about it, the system was made, linkages, everything. And for a system that's been happening for centuries, I feel like trying to break a system or change a system is really hard. And like, you know, as you were saying earlier, I feel like it's by creating a new system, creating another system, an alternate system, where you could really start from scratch. And that might be even harder, but I don't think so. I think we really just stuck in that, you know, it's for us to actually step out of that system a little bit. It made sense when we talked about how, you know, how it feels. There's a lot going on, and a lot going on in pockets. And how do we pull that together? So because we're stuck in competition. So that you know, it's so we feel that it's, I'm saying we because it feels like that for me too. We feel that it's hard to collaborate because we've been socialized, we've been indoctrinated to compete. Right. So even just look at classroom, you know, who came first in tests, and you know, they test you and you have prizes, and so, you know, we're built. So, you know, I think collaboration, I think that's one of the questions you asked me. Collaboration is where I see things happening, and the things that can be very successful. And even now, if you look at grants, sometimes you see a grant, it's like, I could only do like half of this. But they're asking for they're asking for one organization. And I'm like, there's no way one organization could do all of this. So sometimes you have to write and ask, is it okay to collaborate? Is it okay? There's never enough information on that. Like when people are sending out for offering grants, they call for proposals. So I think that's one area that we could look at in terms of systems and creating new systems and collaboration. Maybe the state could do that, or maybe, you know, international organizations, that might be a role they could take. Like, we want to see collaborators, and we want to get like this mix of different skills and techniques and ways of thinking.